Mike knocked and entered Logan's office. Garrett just got a text from a burner phone. Want to guess who sent it to him? Mike handed Logan the printout of the message. Charles and Miranda Kingston are meeting in the Kingston's building coffee shop in 30 minutes to discuss something you will find very interesting. Control of the Kingston group is up for grabs. Signed, a friend. Logan quickly read the message, then leaned back in his chair with a smile. So Charles has finally decided to stand up to his wife and fight back. I assume you'll be listening to this very interesting conversation, he stated. Charles's tale has already connected with the person following Miranda for us, and the recording devices are in place. I'll be able to hear every word back here at the office, Mike told him. Excellent, Logan praised him. So what finally pushed Charles over the edge? Or should I say, who pushed him over the edge? I assume Max Rutherford paid Charles a visit looking for his mistress and son. Quite poetic of you, by the way, Mike. Mistress for a mistress, son for a son. I didn't think you had it in you. I try, boss, Mike grinned. And how are our kidnapping victims faring? Logan asked. They've already cashed their check and landed in Bermuda. They should be sipping pina coladas on the beach by now, Mike replied. There's nothing like the bonds of family, is there? Remind me when this is all over that you need a raise, Mike. A big one, Logan told him. Mike's grin grew. I'll be sure to do that, boss. Logan's face turned serious. How's Violet's investigation going? Any developments? When Violet was very young, around 6 years old, she was admitted to the hospital and stayed for over 6 months. I don't know why yet. The attending doctor is deceased, and this particular hospital has been merged and sold multiple times, so employee records are sketchy at best, Mike reported. What about medical records? Logan asked. Destroyed in a fire 15 years ago, Mike replied. Logan and Mike exchanged a look, both thinking the same thing. That this fire didn't sound like an accident, but an act of arson. Who wanted to bury Violet's childhood medical records so badly? Was it Charles and Miranda? But why? Keep at it, Mike. I want to know everything that happened to Violet during those years. Don't miss anything, Logan instructed. Yes, boss. By the way, Violet keeps asking me about you. She says she has something to tell you. Are you really not going to see her? Mike was afraid that his boss would go overboard and push Violet away for good. Now is not the best time. Let's talk about it later. Logan wanted to wait for the dust to settle before seeing Violet. There were some things that he still couldn't tell her, or his entire plan could be in jeopardy. Okay, but you should know that Priya has reported that Jay has been spending more and more time around Violet. After Mike told Logan this, he braced for the explosion. What? Logan was so furious, he swept the entire contents of his desk onto the floor. Jay's twice her age. What is that man thinking? Logan fumed. Logan decided he'd been careless. He'd been so busy guarding against Lionel and Garrett's romantic advances that he'd let the salt and pepper devil Jay get too close to Violet. What should Logan do? He couldn't just sit here and let this happen. But he couldn't contact Violet yet. If he did, all Logan's previous efforts would be in vain. No one believed that he had already broken up with Violet. Logan felt that if he saw Violet now, after not having seen her in such a long time, he wouldn't be able to hold it in anymore. He wouldn't be able to keep pretending he didn't care. Logan coldly instructed Mike. How about this? You make a trip for me and tell Violet in no uncertain terms that I have not mentioned breaking up with her yet. She is not in a position to accept other men's advances. I'll tell her, but I can't guarantee whether she will listen to me or not. Mike felt that his boss was courting death. Didn't he know how popular Violet was? If she really fell in love with Jay, the boss wouldn't be able to force her to break up with him. Jay Fannin was a famous artist. It was hard to say if this latest rumor was true, who would ultimately win Violet's heart. Well, as added insurance, I'm sure we can come up with some ways to make sure Jay's pursuit of Violet doesn't go smoothly, Logan told him, a cold smile on his face. I think it's time for some of Jay's former girlfriends to drop by, or if someone were to make sure his buddy and boss, Garrett, found out anonymously, I'm sure that wouldn't make Jay's work life very easy. Boss, wouldn't it be easier just to see Violet? Do you really not want to see her? Mike asked. It's not that I don't want to see her. I just can't right now. Logan was a little irritated with Mike. Of course he wanted to see Violet, Logan thought to himself. She is all he thought about every minute of every day. His longing and desire for Violet grew stronger the longer they were separated. Violet was his everything, and it was killing Logan for them to be apart. Corey buzzed Logan to tell him his grandmother was on the phone. Mike left to run point on the Charles operation, and Logan took the call. Grandmother wanted him to meet her at the club to have tea with Ava Monroe and her parents. Logan's mood darkened further at the request, but he knew he had no choice, and summoned the courage to agree. Logan figured, if nothing else, it might allow him the opportunity to explain to Ava not to have any false hopes or unnecessary fantasies about Logan and this engagement. Charles was seething while he waited for Miranda to arrive at the coffee shop. Max was there, glaring at him, but Charles tried to ignore him. He was glad they were in a public place because if looks could kill, Charles would be dead from the looks his father-in-law gave him. He still couldn't believe Chloe had been behind Sylvia's miscarriage at the hotel. Charles figured Miranda must have put her daughter up to it. He wouldn't put something like this past Miranda, but he thought his relationship with Chloe was more substantial than that. Had Miranda forced Chloe to help her? Charles hated Miranda. His wife had been controlling and manipulating him for the past few decades. If Charles took her on in a head-to-head fight, he really didn't know who would win in the end. Miranda was the beginning and the end of all Charles's problems as far as he was concerned. Kenneth's death was because his wife couldn't control herself and acted on her own impulses. Charles hadn't had a peaceful night's sleep since his father died, haunted by what she'd done. If Charles wanted to defeat Miranda, he knew taking her down for what happened to Kenneth was the surest way to do it. If Miranda was in jail, maybe Charles could start living his life again, unburdened. Remembering the anonymous text he'd sent Garrett just a few minutes ago, Charles thought there might be hope. Perhaps he could kill two birds with one stone, so to speak. He'd sent Garrett a message, hoping that it might create an opening for him to buy Charles's Kingston Group shares. He no longer trusted transferring them to Lionel. He needed another buyer, quickly, since Charles was out of cash. Garrett was already in business with the Kingston Group. Perhaps it was time the man learned a bit more about the people he was doing business with. The more Garrett knew about the Kingston family, the better. Charles knew doing business with a murderer wouldn't be a good look for the Lorry Group. If Garrett found out what Miranda had done to Kenneth, would he take action and have her secretly dealt with, saving Charles the trouble? Charles could only cross his fingers and hope. Charles sat nervously in the coffee shop, waiting for Miranda to show up. He'd sent Garrett a text anonymously, telling him they would be meeting shortly. He hoped Garrett would be interested in buying Charles's shares of the Kingston Group, but he hoped even more that Garrett would find out what Miranda had done to Kenneth and take action against her, saving Charles the trouble. If his plan succeeded in implicating Miranda in Kenneth's murder, Violet would be satisfied that her aunt had been brought to justice. At that time, Charles would tell Violet he had been the one to trap Miranda. Maybe then Violet would be satisfied and not seek revenge on Charles as well. Miranda had always told Charles he was useless and that without her interference, the Kingston Group would have fallen into a chaotic mess. Now Charles decided it was just that Miranda had suppressed him for so long that he'd forgotten about his own abilities. If his plan worked, he would feel like a genius. Charles could come up with a sneaky plan with the best of them. Miranda had just never given him the chance to show it. Charles could only cross his fingers and hope that Garrett would do what he wanted. He tried to make his text as appealing as possible, and he knew Garrett's interest would be piqued by the thought of taking control of the Kingston group. Charles had waited for as long as he could to see if Garrett would reply to his text, but he only had a few minutes before he had to get back to meet Miranda. Charles knew Garrett would suspect the anonymous text was from him, but he couldn't help that. Desperate times called for desperate measures. He knew Garrett would never come to the cafe himself, so for every person that entered the restaurant, Charles stared at them, wondering if they could be Garrett's informant. What Charles didn't realize was that Logan's spies were already in place inside the coffee shop, and Mike was, at this very moment, back in his office waiting to record and listen to their conversation. Mike, who always made good use of high-tech tools, sat in his security office on the first floor of Smith Group. He was drinking coffee and wearing headphones while he waited. Mike's posture was relaxed, but his expression was serious and alert as he waited to listen to what Charles and Miranda would say. He knew anything said could be used as direct evidence in his investigation. There was nothing else more important he had to do right now. This was Mike's only task. When Garrett saw the anonymous text on his phone, his heart skipped a beat. Would Garrett be interested in taking over the Kingston group? The answer was yes, of course. This anonymous person seemed to know Garrett well enough to guess his thoughts. If Garrett took control of the Kingston group, it would be his chance to take out Lionel. Their current partnership had been a necessary evil, as Garrett had needed Lionel's help to destroy the Smith group. Now that Garrett was on the cusp of succeeding in that endeavor, he would have no trouble stabbing Lionel in the back. Lionel wanted to control the Kingston group to be close to Violet. He'd made it very clear from the beginning that a condition of their partnership was Garrett staying out of his business at Kingston Group and away from Violet. Lionel was obsessed with the woman he'd once thrown over for the sake of his own future. Violet and Lionel were on par with each other in the Kingston Group. Even if Lionel did not have as many shares as Violet, he was still a powerful voice on the board of directors. Lionel was sneaky and evil, and Violet was honest and innocent. Garrett didn't think Violet would be Lionel's match in the business world. With Logan no longer able to protect her because of his own problems, Violet would probably fall back into Lionel's arms because she would need his help. She would lose both money and power. But what other choice would Violet have? Who else could help her? Now this anonymous text message had aroused the deepest desire in Garrett's heart. He was all for growing his empire, but he didn't have any real interest in control of the Kingston Group. The key was Violet. Logan was still stubbornly refusing to let go of her, despite his current situation, and Garrett's interest in Violet was only growing stronger. Taking out Lionel would ensure the battle for Violet's heart was brother versus brother, with no outside competition. Garrett knew he had other women interested in him. Elizabeth looked at him with seductive eyes. He knew he was Elizabeth's backup plan, as she preferred his brother. Still, the woman couldn't help the desire that Garrett aroused in her, and he could sense Elizabeth's lusty thoughts when they were together. And then there was Anna. She was his grandmother's choice, and while Garrett had outwardly agreed to pursue her, he knew his pursuit was purely practical. Anna's position as Logan's sister and secretary at Smith Group had made her an invaluable resource. She had unwittingly contributed significantly to Garrett's success in taking down Smith Group. Anna had come to him seeking help for her brother, but she had unknowingly provided the final nail in Logan's coffin. She had told Garrett of Corey's plan to travel overseas to investigate the Smith Group's partner. Because of Anna, Garrett could foil Logan's plans, and Corey and his team ultimately returned home red-faced and empty-handed. Now, Garrett was just waiting for Joanna to try to convince him to buy the Smith Group so he could swoop in and buy the company. Logan's demise was now assured. Garrett let out a long breath. He didn't hate women who admired him. It was just that neither Elizabeth nor Anna was the woman he wanted. Garrett wanted Violet. Staring at the anonymous text Garrett strongly suspected was from Charles, he made up his mind. Garrett called his assistant and asked him to send someone to listen in on Miranda and Charles's conversation at the coffee shop. If there was any information that could help Garrett get rid of Lionel and bring him closer to Violet, Garrett wanted to hear what it was. When Miranda finally arrived at the coffee shop to meet Charles and her father, the first thing she heard when she walked in the door was shouting. Apparently, her father had grown tired of waiting and was now loudly pointing and yelling at Charles, accusing him of kidnapping Max's woman and child. Charles must have grown impatient himself, as in return he was yelling back about false accusations and that her father must be going senile. The two men looked ready to go for round 2 in the fistfight they'd previously started in Miranda's study at the Kingston mansion. Their waiter tried to persuade them to calm down, but neither man was listening. Miranda quickly rushed over and grabbed her father's arm. "Dad, you must calm down. Arguing will solve nothing." "I will not calm down, not even for you, Miranda. There are 2 lives at stake. I want to know where they are, Charles. What have you done with Katie and Ace?" Max was furious. Why was his daughter not more concerned? "Miranda, call off your father now, or I will call the police. I mean it," Charles yelled at her. "I should be the one calling the cops," Max shouted. "Then I can have you arrested for kidnapping." Miranda saw that they had attracted the attention of everyone in the crowded coffee shop. She felt embarrassed and angry. She quickly grabbed her father with one hand and Charles with the other. "Both of you, stop it right now. Sit down so we can talk privately. You are attracting an audience," she hissed at the 2 men in a whisper. Charles and Max noticed the circle of curious onlookers for the first time, and they knew Miranda was right. Still glaring at one another, the 2 men sat down on opposite sides of the table. Miranda handed their waiter a $100 bill for his trouble and asked him to get them coffee. Appeased, the waiter walked off, and their audience dispersed, the show now over. Sitting down next to her father, Miranda thanked the waiter for bringing them their coffee, and all remained silent until he left again. Miranda breathed a sigh of relief. Now they could talk in private, just the 3 of them. Well, the 3 of them plus Garrett's informant, Logan's spies inside the restaurant, and Mike, who was monitoring and recording every word they said back in his office. For their secret audience, the show was just getting started. There was a tense silence around the table inside the coffee shop as the waiter served them and then walked off. Miranda breathed a sigh of relief that Charles and her father had calmed down enough so they could sit down and discuss their issues privately. She had no idea that Mike, his spies, and Garrett's informant were all secretly listening in on their conversation. "Charles, I demand you hand over Katie and my son. I know it was you who kidnapped them," Max hissed. "For the last time, I have no idea what you're talking about, Max. Why would I want to kidnap your woman and son? I didn't even know they existed until today," Charles insisted. Before her father could reply, Miranda cut in. "Dad, as much as I hate to agree with him, Charles is too much of a coward to kidnap anyone. Charles nodded in satisfaction at Miranda's defense, although he was starting to grow annoyed at everyone calling him a coward. Miranda continued, Charles isn't a kidnapper. He's a thief and a liar. I'm here to talk today about the sale of the Kingston mansion. Imagine my surprise when the new owners arrive ready to move in today. I want that money, Charles, and I demand you immediately transfer the proceeds from the house sale to me. Miranda was not interested in her father's woman and son. No way. Don't even think about it. Your time benefiting from my Kingston name is over. The mansion's mine, and the money from its sale is mine. Charles refused. After marrying into the Kingston family, Miranda had enjoyed the benefits of being a member of his family for years. Yet, it wasn't good enough. Now his greedy wife wanted even more money. Everything in the Kingston family belonged to him, Charles. He did not want to give Miranda a single cent. What? He sold the Kingston mansion? Charles, are you crazy? Max suddenly said after he realized what his daughter was saying. How could you do that? That's supposed to be the home for the head of the Kingston family. The heir of the family has always lived there. Max was indignant. Max temporarily forgot about his lover and son. He needed to pay attention to his daughter's family business. If Miranda lost Charles and everything in the Kingston family, who would Max go to for money in the future? Max, keep up. Violet won the lawsuit. Charles was exasperated with his father-in-law. I'm no longer the head of the family and have no desire to live in the mansion. I wanted out and I got out. I can do that because it was my house in the first place. You're a Rutherford, not a Kingston. This has nothing to do with you, so stay out of it. Those are strong words from someone who's been riding Rutherford coattails for years. If it weren't for me doing away with your old man, you would have lost the inheritance years ago to that niece of yours. Miranda spoke in a low voice, but her tone was deadly. Mike felt a chill go down his spine as Miranda's murderous words filtered into his ears. He broke out into a cold sweat and ripped off his headphones to calm his heart. As Logan's head of security and a former military man, he had seen a lot of ugliness in this life. But what Miranda had just said was on a whole other level. What kind of deep hatred would make a man like Charles agree to let his wife kill his own father? It was unbelievable. Mike's brain worked furiously. He didn't think this was what Logan expected him to discover when he'd asked Mike to keep an eye on Charles and Miranda. Should he tell his boss about this right now, or should he wait? The boss's company was in a terrible crisis, and it would only add to his burden if he told Logan about this. And what about Violet? Did Violet know about this? Mike remembered what Violet had said to him the day he'd taken her to visit the prison. If she didn't know for sure, she suspected something. How did she survive all these years carrying such a burden, if she did know? These were Violet's family members. This was much more serious than fighting for inheritance rights. Mike was leaving after this to investigate the boss's kidnapping. He had a lead in Northern California he needed to follow up on in Pacific Grove. Plus, he had to look into why Violet spent 6 months in the hospital as a child. Maybe it was better to wait a little longer to tell Logan about Charles and Miranda. When Mike returned, he could fill the boss in. It would give Mike some time to get his team to investigate the details of Kenneth's death, and hard evidence would help with any case against Miranda. Mike put back on his headphones to listen further. Charles was speaking. Lower your voice, Miranda. Do you want everyone in Los Angeles to know about this? Of course. I wouldn't mind letting everyone see the true face of the Rutherford family. What do you mean? Old man Rutherford's words were threatening. If you dare to reveal the things we've done in the past, I'll make sure you go down with us, Charles. Charles coldly snorted. He knew he was in the position of power right now. I never asked Miranda to kill my father. Your daughter didn't listen to me and acted of her own accord. I won't take responsibility for this. If you dare speak nonsense, I don't mind letting my father's death be known to the world. Miranda was angry and scared. Her face was pale, and she quickly grabbed Charles's hand. It was as if she was worried he would stand up and announce her dark deed in the next second. I just wanted my share of the money for the house sale. How can you threaten me like this? You can't take it all for yourself. Part of that money is mine, and our daughter's money. You can have the house on the west side of the city. Remember that one? Our little love nest from when we first got married? Take it. I have no good memories from there anyways. As for the money for selling the Kingston mansion, perhaps we can make a deal. If you divorce me as soon as possible and leave Sylvia and the baby alone, I might consider giving you a portion. Charles crossed his legs, enjoying the rare feeling of having control over his wife. Miranda was furious, but Charles had something on her, something that could ruin the rest of her life. If she fought him head on, there would be no benefit. She had to think carefully and get the money first. After that, she would deal with Charles properly. Otherwise, Kenneth's death would haunt her forever. Charles could trot out this information and threaten her whenever he wanted something, and she'd have no choice but to comply. Miranda wouldn't live like that. Miranda stared at Charles for a while before softening her attitude. She smiled and said, "Why are we fighting, Charles? We've always been on the same side in the past. We were together a long time, and we've had our share of good times. And we still have 2 daughters. You should also think about them. Miranda, if you had been able to give me a son, I wouldn't have gone outside our marriage." Charles felt Miranda's gentle words were too little, too late. It was you who was heartless first. It was not my wish for us to become like this. It's not like I was the first man to ever cheat on his wife. But you even forced Chloe to find someone, to hurt my woman and child. Who told Charles that? Miranda wondered. She nervously looked around at the surrounding tables. Seeing that no one was paying attention to them, Miranda lowered her voice and told Charles, "I don't know anything about that. I had nothing to do with what happened to Sylvia that day, and I certainly didn't force Chloe to do anything." Miranda looked at her husband straight in the eye before lying through her teeth. "Charles, you know that was all Violet's doing. Everything always comes back to Violet." Miranda was trying to blame Violet for the attack on Sylvia and his unborn child, but Charles wasn't buying it. He knew Chloe was behind it, and he figured Miranda had put her up to it. His soon-to-be ex-wife was running scared since Charles had threatened to reveal Miranda killed his father. So she was back to blaming a familiar target, Violet. Charles shook his head. If Violet had that level of deceit in her, she wouldn't have been chased out of the country all those years ago. "Don't treat me like this anymore, Miranda. I have woken up. Violet is my niece. She wouldn't hurt me." His wife treated him like a fool and tried to cover it up with her lies. Charles didn't dare to offend Violet anymore, believing she was innocent. He'd heard the office gossip. Outsiders knew Chloe was behind Sylvia's attack, yet Miranda somehow thought she could fool Charles. Miranda hated this new version of her husband. Why had Charles grown a backbone at the exact moment she needed him to roll over and cave? He cheated on and betrayed her, and now he was threatening her. Miranda just wanted this meeting to be over. "All right, since apparently I have no choice in the matter, I will accept the house west of the city," Miranda conceded. "And as far as I'm concerned, the divorce can't happen quickly enough. You and I have other assets to divide. We can discuss those at a later date. Now, if there's nothing else, I'm leaving." Max frowned and glared at Charles fiercely, as if he could kill him on the spot. He still didn't know the whereabouts of his mistress and son, and Max was still suspicious of Charles. Charles was still a little afraid of his father-in-law, so he only nodded his head at Miranda, threw down some bills to pay for their coffee, and left. Now Charles just had to hope that someone had caught the entirety of their conversation on tape. Joanna had been growing increasingly anxious over the last week. Smith Group was in crisis. Her son Logan was going to be out of a job, and the Alexanders were about to lose the company. Joanna had returned to Los Angeles to mend her relationship with Logan, so of course she wanted to help him. She still had many connections in Los Angeles, and Joanna was ready to call in favors to help the Smith Group resolve their crisis. However, she'd quickly discovered that the Smith Group's problems were too big to solve easily. Even those allies who wanted to help Joanna didn't have access to the funds needed to save the company. Supposedly, the amount required to pull the Smith Group out of its current hole numbered in the billions. Joanna's efforts were entirely in vain, and she returned home empty-handed. Very few had access to that kind of money, and of those who did, no one would feel obligated to help the Alexanders. That's when Joanna realized the answer to Logan's problem was right under her nose. Garrett. Garrett was the sole heir of the Gardner family business, and Sarah Gardner had protected Garrett as he rose within Lori Group's ranks to his current position as CEO. Since Joanna was last in Los Angeles, her youngest son's star had risen, and the Lori Group's profits were at an all-time high under his leadership. In addition, Garrett had formed profitable partnerships with the Kingston Group, the Smith Group, and even Lionel's family company, Lawson Group. Joanna thought her idea to save Logan was brilliant. Garrett could buy the Smith Group. Unbeknownst to Joanna, this was precisely what Garrett had been waiting for her to suggest. He had been the one to set the Smith Group's demise in motion in the first place, and Garrett was determined to steal the company out from under Logan. Only then would the Gardners have revenge on the Alexanders, and Garrett's personal vendetta against Logan would be fulfilled. If Garrett could get his grandmother revenge, she'd hopefully abandon her romance plans for Anna and Garrett. In their battle of brothers, Garrett wanted not only to win the business, but destroy Logan personally by claiming Violet as his prize. Joanna had been a frequent visitor to the Alexander residence in recent days. She'd been going to complain to Agnes about the company's problems, accusing her of being irresponsible. In Joanna's mind, Agnes should have never let Logan manage such a big business as the Smith Group on his own. She even blamed Christopher's affair as being a cause of the Smith Group's current crisis. If you'd kept better track of your son in the past, Agnes, Christopher wouldn't have run himself ragged, Joanna accused. Then my husband wouldn't have found himself in such a vulnerable position that he let himself be fooled by that witch, Fiona. Perhaps Christopher could have taught his son how to manage the Smith Group better if he hadn't died so young. Joanna was always happy to place blame on Fiona. When Joanna thought of what was happening in Smith Group, she hated Fiona's daughter Anna even more. Joanna didn't know what was wrong with Sarah. She kept forcing Garrett to date Anna, as if all other women in the world had died. Agnes did not appreciate Joanna's accusations. Mind your own business, Joanna. You are now a member of the Gardner family. Don't worry about the Alexander family's business. If it weren't for my help, the relationship between the two families wouldn't have been as peaceful as it's been, given what happened to Jackson. You know the Gardners blame the Alexanders. Joanna sniffed. Yes, it's all because of you, Joanna. Isn't this the reason why you are welcome in both Gardner and Alexander families? The reason both families support your lavish lifestyle? Agnes coldly harumphed. Well, luckily, I'm here again to save the day. Joanna then explained her plan to get Garrett to purchase the Smith Group. Of course, Agnes was furious. It turns out that this was the reason why Joanna had stayed in the country for so long. Joanna claimed she wanted to help Logan, but Agnes wasn't buying it. Joanna usually was only thinking about Joanna. The two women parted on bad terms. Before Joanna left, she told Agnes angrily, letting his younger brother buy the Smith Group is better than letting outsiders buy it. No matter what, they are still related by blood. Perhaps they can even manage it together, and Garrett can help Logan regroup. Don't dismiss this idea, Agnes. This is the only way to keep the company somewhat in the Alexander family now. Agnes still didn't trust Joanna. When Logan returned home that night, Agnes was waiting and quickly filled him in on his mother's suggestion. Her idea is ridiculous, isn't it? Imagine a gardener owning the Smith Group. It's an insulting idea. His grandmother fumed. Logan, however, didn't appear to be offended or humiliated by Joanna's suggestion. He just smiled and said, Maybe it's a good idea, grandmother. After all, Garrett and I are half-brothers. I believe that Joanna's purpose for coming back this time wasn't to harm me, but to help me. Now that Smith Group is in danger, my mother wants to help us out. It's not like we can't think about it. Agnes was surprised by her grandson's calm demeanor. She found herself softening to the idea of Garrett buying Smith Group. Maybe Joanna really was thinking about Logan and the rest of the Alexanders. Agnes sighed and agreed with Logan. Okay, fine. I'll talk to Joanna about it. Maybe there is some merit to her idea. Agnes conceded. Great idea. Don't let this bother you, Logan said in a relaxed tone. Changing the subject, Agnes said, So, Violet, how are you getting rid of her? You can't have her hanging around when word gets out about your marriage. Logan frowned. I have already arranged it. And grandmother, Violet's now the director of Kingston Group. Don't use that tone when you talk about her. No matter what the world thought, Violet was still Logan's woman, and he wouldn't let anyone, not even his grandmother, insult her. Logan was unhappy at the way his grandmother was speaking about Violet. No matter what the world thought, Violet was still Logan's woman and the mother of his children, and he didn't want anyone criticizing her. Other than Logan, no one got to tell Violet what to do. Logan brought up his constructive suggestions for Violet so that she could improve in the future, but their relationship was completely different. Violet always listened attentively to Logan's lectures and relished his feedback. That was completely different from his grandmother's unprovoked attacks. Grandmother, Violet is not the person you think she is. She's not a social climber and doesn't need my money. She's the director of the Kingston Group now, Logan told her. Agnes rolled her eyes. You always protect her. I fear you will walk the same path as your father. I am not my father, and Violet's not Joanna either, Logan replied firmly. Joanna's no saint, but she's still your mother. She wouldn't harm you, but Violet might, Agnes said. Logan snorted and shook his head. He wasn't buying a benevolent Joanna, but wanted to get his grandmother off the subject. Grandmother, I've had a very long day and I'm tired. I'm a grown man and know what I'm doing. Must you bombard me the minute I walk in the front door with an argument? If you want to treat me like a child, why don't you greet me with a glass of milk and some homemade cookies like other grandmothers? Why do I get scolding and lectures instead? Because you give me so many reasons to have to scold and lecture you, that's why, Agnes responded. Agnes wasn't backing down. She'd been worried about Logan's marriage for years, because he'd given her plenty of reasons to worry. He would find excuses to shirk the responsibility and always said he knew what he was doing. Well, given Logan's dismal romantic history, Agnes saw no evidence of that. First, there was the whole Elizabeth nonsense. When Agnes had begun to hear the rumors about Logan and Elizabeth, she'd looked into Elizabeth's background, and her investigation results were not encouraging. Elizabeth appears gentle and virtuous on the surface, but in private is something of a party girl with many male friends. Agnes knew that men and women were equal and that you could be friends with a member of the opposite sex. But in Elizabeth's case, there had been a lot of ambiguous past relationships. She had hoped Elizabeth would be a fleeting fling, but then the woman had stuck around for 4 years. Even more worrying to Agnes, Logan never lived with Elizabeth or introduced her to the family. As far as Agnes could tell, the only time Logan even saw the woman was when he occasionally escorted Elizabeth to some event. Otherwise, he just bought her expensive gifts and financed her career. Agnes couldn't figure their relationship out, if you could even call what Elizabeth and Logan had a relationship, that is. It had made going to Agnes's weekly tea date with her friends at the country club somewhat awkward. Her friends would ask her when Logan was going to get married and give her some great-grandchildren, and Agnes never had a good answer for them. Agnes would come home from these tea dates and complain to Alex. He would comfort her, but then he'd always advise, let nature take its course. You can't force things. This advice had always just aggravated Agnes. Alex might as well not console her, she thought. Why couldn't Logan just let Agnes find him some nice girl from a good family if he was too lazy to get on with it himself? Then, the next thing Agnes knew, Elizabeth was out, and Logan was sleeping with his secretary. This was pretty much Agnes's worst-case scenario. She feared Logan would be taken in by a gold digger and become his father. And then, in the craziest twist of all, it turned out that Logan had had a one-night stand with Violet, and they had 2 children together. Violet and Logan had both been drugged and slept together. Agnes thought this was the craziest story she'd ever heard. Logan had mistaken Elizabeth for Violet, which is why he'd stayed with Elizabeth for all those years. Agnes wondered if the whole thing was a trap set up by the Kingston family. She would not readily accept this account unless Violet could prove to Agnes that she was honorable enough and a worthy match for her grandson. Ironically, at least Agnes could go to tea with her friends peacefully, as now when they asked about Logan, she could respond by talking about her great-grandchildren. Adam and Amy were now Agnes's greatest treasures and the glory of the Alexander family. When Agnes praised how obedient and beautiful her grandchildren were, no one bothered her any more about Logan's marital status. And finally, there was the matter of Logan's little girl, standing in the way of him marrying. Agnes didn't know if Logan would ever marry any woman, unless he found out what happened to the little girl from his kidnapping. After so many years, Logan had still not forgotten about her. Agnes had never believed the little girl was real, and she'd even hired a famous psychiatrist to give Logan psychological counseling to try to draw out his repressed memories. When Logan was rescued, some farmers had found him wandering alone with a large gash on his head. Despite treatment, his memories of what had happened to him during his ordeal were fuzzy at best. They never found out who had kidnapped him, and no one was ever brought to justice. The only thing that Logan claimed to remember with certainty was a little girl who had given him a carton of milk. When the psychologist determined that, in his expert opinion, Logan's little girl was an imaginary friend, manifested during a time of significant trauma as a coping mechanism, Agnes was secretly relieved. She didn't want Logan to marry some strange little girl he'd met on a mountain. Her husband, Logan's grandfather, had always remained non-committal on the subject. He just always said, "You never know what might happen in the future." Her grandson, of course, had never believed what the psychologist said. Over the years, Logan had searched for the girl, but had never found any tangible proof of her existence. It had been many years, but Agnes feared that Logan remained unmarried because he still hadn't discovered the girl's identity. Therefore, given Logan's lackluster love life, Agnes figured she was completely justified in being concerned about his marriage. So now she scowled at Logan and said, "I won't stop worrying about your marriage until my stubborn grandson finally says I do." "Be careful that Adam and Amy don't hear you scolding me, grandmother, or they'll look down on their father," Logan told her. If Agnes wouldn't sympathize with him, Logan knew that children's names would snap her out of her tirade. After a long suffering sigh, Agnes waved Logan off. "All right, fine, I'll drop it. Go to bed. I'll let it go for now. Since you've agreed to cooperate with the arranged marriage to Ava Monroe, I know this thing with Ava may be a temporary measure. But remember, that doesn't mean that you can't take this opportunity to get to know another woman better. You never know," Agnes told him with an encouraging smile. Logan pursed his lips noncommittally, but said nothing. Unfortunately for Agnes, Logan had long ago made up his mind about who he wanted to marry, and it most definitely was not Ava Monroe. Logan knew he would never marry Ava Monroe, despite what his grandmother and the rest of the world might think. His arranged marriage was a ploy to make his enemies feel like they'd beat him. Logan hoped the news of his so-called marriage to Ava would cause issues with the woman he actually wanted to marry. Hopefully Violet understood Logan better than that. As soon as he settled his business with the Smith Group, Logan would be able to see Violet again. Considering how Mike constantly reported that Violet wanted to talk to him, Logan was both pleased and a bit apprehensive. When he and Violet faced each other again, Logan would seemingly have lost everything. He wondered what her attitude towards him would be like then. Logan hoped Violet wouldn't disappoint him. The news of Logan's marriage was starting to leak out, and it was Jay who ultimately broke the news to Violet. Jay was at a dinner with friends, listening to the latest gossip, when one of Jay's friends said, "I never thought that the glorious Smith Group would have to rely on a marriage alliance to survive. Logan must be humiliated." He was shocked, and Jay even cut his friend off to confirm that he had heard him correctly. Jay had just finished a session with Violet a short time ago, and she'd said nothing. This kind of news would take off like wildfire, and Jay knew it was only a matter of time before Violet found out. The next day, when Violet arrived at the studio, Jay quickly pulled her aside to break the news. "I'm so sorry you had to hear this from me, Violet. I know you would have preferred a heads up from him. You must mentally prepare yourself for the gossip and speculation that's going to surround Logan's marriage. I'm always here if you need to talk," Jay told her sympathetically. Violet's only response was silence and "Thank you for telling me." Jay felt terrible for Violet, since she was his friend, but he also worried about how this would impact Violet's work with him. The production time of the theme song was tight, and Jay couldn't allow Violet to become distracted. Of course, some of the best love songs were about heartache. Violet could channel her heart and soul into the music if her broken heart became too much to bear. After all, art originated from life. For the rest of the day, Violet's expression was very absent-minded. Several times when Jay spoke directly to her, it was as if Violet didn't hear him, although she was standing right next to him. The news of Logan's engagement had obviously come as a great shock. Jay knew that Violet and Logan had been on a break, so to speak, but he didn't think it was a permanent thing. He'd seen how Logan came barreling into the studio that day The picture of Violet and Garrett looking affectionate had appeared online. From Violet's demeanor, Jay could tell that she also believed that Logan's distance would be a temporary situation. Recently, when Logan's name came up, Violet looked exasperated, and she'd even expressed her frustrations about men to Jay one day when they'd been taking a break together. "I just don't understand men, Jay. One second, Logan won't leave me alone, wanting to control my every move, and then, poof, he disappears. Yet Mike tells me to be patient, that Logan will explain himself in time." What is that supposed to mean? Violet had raised her hands in frustration. At that point, Jay offered to help Violet get Logan's attention. The whole thing had been Jay's idea. Violet didn't have such a scheming mind. Jay liked Violet as an artist, but he also liked her as a person. He had no romantic affection for Violet. Their relationship was more like a big brother and little sister. But he knew Logan probably didn't realize that. The surest way to get a man's attention, Violet, is to show him he has competition. You've seen Logan's reaction to Garrett after all, Jay told her. Yes, but I've told Logan repeatedly that Garrett and I are just friends. Apparently, Logan's no longer worried about Garrett, since he's ignoring me, Violet said dejectedly. Well, let's give Logan someone new to worry about, Jay grinned. Me. Violet had looked at Jay like he was crazy, but didn't object to his idea outright, so Jay ran with it. He invited Violet to lunch daily, and even a couple of dinners. Jay told Priya that if anyone gave Violet any trouble in the studio, she should come to find him personally to handle the matter. He knew that statement would get back to Logan, since Priya was Logan's spy. Others in the office began to notice Jay's pursuit, and rumors about Jay and Violet soon started to spread. He didn't know how Logan would react to the news of Jay's attention to Violet. Logan had been living in virtual seclusion. Except for the people of Smith Group, no one had seen him. So Jay waited, curious to see what, if anything, Logan would do. Jay didn't wait long. Logan's reaction was swift but subtle. Only Jay could feel it. For example, Garrett suddenly resumed his daily studio visits to see Violet, and his partner would insert himself in any conversation he saw Jay and Violet have. Obviously, something Garrett had heard made him suspicious of Jay's intentions with Violet. Then there was the barrage of contact from Jay's ex-girlfriends. Women he'd not been in contact with for months, or even years, were suddenly calling, texting, and dropping by the studio in a bid to get his attention. Jay received invitations for drinks, dinners, and concerts. One woman even offered to take him sailing on her yacht in the Caribbean. Frankly, the woman's enthusiasm scared Jay a little, but he knew his plan to make Logan jealous had worked. Jay was a little self-satisfied. He knew the onslaught of former lovers was Logan's doing. Apparently, Logan decided to keep Jay so busy that he wouldn't have time to pursue Violet. Women were lining up to date him. Jay wasn't complaining, though. What man wouldn't love so much female attention? So, given Logan's recent reaction to Jay's supposed pursuit of Violet, the announcement of Logan's pending marriage to another woman made absolutely no sense to Jay. He could only comfort his friend and hope Logan knew what he was doing, and what he was potentially risking. The news that Logan was going to marry Ava Monroe had now taken off and dominated social media discussions. The press picked up the story and ran with it. Violet and Elizabeth, as the ex-girlfriends, once again became the focal point of everyone's attention. Curses and wars reignited on the internet. Reporters and paparazzi followed Violet and Elizabeth wherever they went with their shouted questions. Elizabeth still had to film a few scenes for her last movie. The press discovered where the production was shooting, and a crowd was waiting for Elizabeth when she exited the studio. Facing the reporters' tricky questions, Elizabeth remained nonchalant and said that she absolutely did not believe Logan would marry another woman. "Miss Kingston, How can you be so sure? Do you have insider information? One reporter shouted to her. I have no further comment. You will understand in good time, Elizabeth replied with a serene smile. Even if Chloe had told her that the Smith Group was in crisis and Logan was about to be out of a job, Elizabeth would not allow any other woman to have him, not Violet and not this Monroe woman. Maybe Logan wouldn't be as rich as before, but Logan's appearance and figure were enough for Elizabeth to drool and be determined to get him. Can't you reveal what you know, Miss Kingston? What makes you so certain Logan won't marry Miss Monroe? Can't you tell us about it? Another reporter begged. Elizabeth smiled proudly and lightly placed her hand on her stomach, rubbing it in a seemingly absent-minded way. She silently stared at the female reporter, daring the woman to figure it out. When a gleam appeared in the reporter's eye, Elizabeth figured her message had been received. Elizabeth smiled absent-mindedly and rubbed her stomach as she looked at the reporters around her. I don't know why you're asking me these questions about Logan's engagement. Why don't you ask my cousin Violet? According to all of you, Violet and Logan have a closer relationship than I do with him. Why don't you go and ask Violet how this news makes her feel? Why just pester me? Am I that easy to bully? Elizabeth pouted. Violet's now the director of Kingston Group. It's tough to access her to ask questions. That's why we need your help, Miss Kingston. A photographer called to her. I know I won't cut ties with Logan. That's all I can say. You'll have to ask my cousin if you really want to know Violet's opinion on Logan's engagement with Miss Monroe. I've already told you, I don't think the marriage will happen. Now, I really must go. Thank you. After she finished speaking, Elizabeth let her assistant Anita and the bodyguards stop the reporters. She got into the car and left, her goal achieved. Elizabeth wanted to see Violet's reaction to the engagement news. When the newspapers bombarded Violet with questions, Elizabeth would have a reason to visit Violet if she lost her composure when faced with the reporters. Violet would be running the Kingston Group soon, and Elizabeth couldn't make it seem like the two cousins were still at war. There would be many media opportunities for them to be photographed together in the future, and they needed to present a united front. Elizabeth wanted to inform outsiders that the Kingston women were cooperating and working together in the Kingston Group. As for the nature of her relationship with Logan, Elizabeth felt it was about time to let Agnes know about the child in her womb. Agnes acknowledged Violet's children as Alexander's. Elizabeth knew she would accept Elizabeth's child. Her child would also be a descendant of the Alexander family and entitled to everything given to Violet's brats. Elizabeth saw an opening for herself. Violet only acted according to her own selfish interests. Elizabeth figured now that Logan was about to be out of a job, Violet would cut ties with him. Look at how fast she'd accepted Jay Fannon's suit, after all. At the same time, Elizabeth planned to stay steadfast and loyal. She would let Logan know she would not abandon him. Logan would soon see Elizabeth in a different light and forget all about Violet. Although her mother's impression of Logan had changed and Miranda no longer forced Elizabeth to chase after Logan, Elizabeth still did not want to give up on him. After all, she'd already told Logan the child in her womb was his. After thinking it over, Elizabeth decided it wouldn't help her situation to take back what she had said. It's not like Elizabeth could marry the child's real father, Lionel. Logan was her only option at this point. At this moment, Logan needed comfort and company the most. As long as Elizabeth took advantage of his vulnerable state, she could use his misfortune as an opportunity. Elizabeth would let Logan feel her undying love and conquer him. Then she would encourage Logan to make a comeback. When he did, it would all be because of her. Elizabeth would have Logan's steadfast loyalty and his ring on her finger. Elizabeth decided this was a good plan B. Elizabeth's plan again aligned with Joanna's goals, and the women resumed their alliance. Joanna supported Elizabeth even more than before. In fact, Logan's mother told her she thought she had come up with a plan that would solve everyone's problems. Joanna had been visiting Agnes every day, trying to persuade her, and she had already discussed it with the Gardners. First, Garrett would provide the funds necessary to expand the Laurie Group and acquire the Smith Group. Then once Smith Group was under Garrett's control, he would hand it over to Logan to manage the day-to-day operations. When everything at the company was back on the right track, Logan would reimburse Garrett and reacquire the Smith Group. Joanna believed her plan would improve both her relationship with her sons and their relationship with each other. Garrett had confided in Joanna that he would provide the funding to purchase the Smith Group because it was Garrett's sincere wish to establish a tight bond with his big brother. Joanna thought it was a win-win solution. Even Agnes, who Joanna had brainwashed in the past, felt that her plan was an excellent idea. Joanna seemed like she was genuinely thinking of Logan and was willing to help. It was good that the Gardner and Alexander families had remained harmonious. Alex was not a fan of Sarah Gardner, and Logan had warned Agnes many times against doing business with the Gardner family. But now, their continued relationship would be what saved the Alexander family. Agnes was thankful she hadn't listened to the two men and had continued maintaining the friendship and cooperation with the Gardner family for decades. Joanna had come to the mansion to finalize details of her plan with Agnes. "I do believe my plan will be a great success, Agnes. Now, we have just a few more details to work out. If you ask me, you should take this opportunity to kick Violet out of Logan's house. She is about to take over the Kingston group. Why is she still living on property owned by an Alexander?" Joanna used this as an opening to make things difficult for Violet. "Careful, Joanna. You must watch your words and who might be listening. No matter how much you hate Violet, you are not allowed to say anything bad about her in front of my great-grandchildren. Otherwise, you won't be welcome in the Alexander mansion in the future." Agnes looked out the window at the twins playing with their dogs in the courtyard. "If you ask me, their mother never taught those children any manners. The two of them barely acknowledged me when I arrived. Hopefully, when Logan marries, his wife will raise the children they have together better than Violet raised those two." Joanna sniffed. "Joanna, I'm not going to tell you again," Agnes said firmly. "Stop talking negatively about the children and their mother. It will not end well for you. And Logan feels the same as I do. Doesn't matter if you offend Logan, but if you offend his son and daughter, watch out. Any hope you have of improving your relationship with your oldest son will be over." "You can't be serious. They're just children. How could they have that big an influence on what their father thinks?" Joanna wasn't convinced. "If you don't believe me, try it. But don't say I didn't warn you." Agnes's tone was very stern. After all, she knew her grandson well. Logan would never tolerate his children being ridiculed or mistreated by anyone, even his mother. Joanna obviously didn't realize how much Logan loved his children, or how much their great-grandmother loved them, for that matter. Agnes thanked heaven every day for the miracle of bringing Adam and Amy into her life. They were the future of the Alexander family and her most valuable treasures. The twins brought joy back into Agnes's life, and she didn't think she could love the two of them any more than she already did. Given Joanna's selfish maternal history, this kind of love was something Joanna would never understand. Agnes thought Joanna was selfish, which was why she didn't understand Logan's love for Adam and Amy. Even when Joanna seemingly acted in her children's best interest, she was always still selfishly motivated. Like now, Joanna wanted Violet to move out of Logan's house because she likely wanted the place for herself. "It's fine to have Violet move out, but you must find an excuse for the children. You mustn't let the twins know that Violet was asked to leave," Agnes warned Joanna. "Adam and Amy were the sweetest kids until you insulted their mother. Then the little ones displayed tempers to rival their fathers." Agnes knew if the twins found out about this, they would blame their great-grandmother and make a big fuss. They'd likely even want to return to live with Violet, and Agnes didn't think she'd be able to change their minds at that point. "Must you spoil the children, Agnes?" Joanna said with a sigh. "When Logan marries, Adam and Amy will have a new mother and siblings. I don't know why you don't understand my logic on this. Right now, we should be creating distance between the twins and Violet. Otherwise, it will be challenging to separate the three of them in the future." "No, that's impossible." Agnes shook her head. "I will do everything I can to separate Violet and Logan. But Violet is the children's mother. I will not keep them from her. It would be cruel to all involved." Agnes wasn't a Violet fan, but even she had her limits, and this was one of them. Children needed their mothers. "You are growing too soft-hearted in your golden years, Agnes." "Fine. We'll start with kicking Violet out of Logan's home. We will discuss the children at a future date. Since Logan's house will be empty, I think it's only fitting that I take up residence there. Someone has to keep an eye on his investment. And who better than his dear mother?" Joanna smiled. Agnes knew it. Everything was always, in the end, about Joanna. "The Gardner family can no longer accommodate you?" she asked. "The Gardner mansion is very cramped and old. Their mansion has only 6 bedrooms. Logan's has 12, and a pool." Joanna didn't add that she planned to have Elizabeth sleep in one of these 12 bedrooms. Elizabeth was complaining about the sale of the Kingston mansion, so Joanna had invited her to stay at Logan's house with her. It would give Elizabeth plenty of opportunities to interact with Logan. Not to mention it would anger Violet. She did not believe that Logan could resist Elizabeth's advances forever. Agnes had no objections to Joanna's request, other than it would make her happy. Since Logan was staying with Agnes for the time being, she asked Mary to arrange with Logan's house staff to accommodate Joanna. The following day, Mary phoned Zoe and Lee, asking them to help Violet move all her things out of Logan's mansion. "Mrs. Alexander said that Mrs. Gardner is going to stay there, but I don't know if that's true," Mary whispered to Zoe and Lee, who were hiding in the pantry so as not to be overheard. "How can she just kick Violet out? Well, if Violet goes, I go. I refuse to serve that nasty woman." Zoe pursed her lips. The cook had previously interacted with Logan's mother and was not a fan. She had already planned to follow Violet to the Kingston mansion to serve her there, and this didn't change her mind. Lee quickly hushed Zoe. "Don't worry, Mary. We'll follow Mrs. Alexander's orders." After Lee hung up, she told Zoe, "Calm down. It's not like Violet wasn't going to move anyways." Zoe thought about it and agreed. Since Logan was not around, his house no longer meant anything to Violet. Neither woman knew Logan had transferred the house into Violet's name, so they could only follow Mrs. Alexander's orders and pack up Violet's things. That night when Violet arrived home from work, she was surprised to see the stack of her neatly packed belongings in the front entryway. Violet felt a lump in her throat. The tears she'd been swallowing since Jay told her of Logan's engagement threatened to spill over, finally. Lee told her everything was finalized for her move in the morning, and Violet just nodded. She didn't want the other woman to know that this was the first she'd heard she was moving. Logan must have ordered his staff to do this without telling Violet. He wanted her out of his house and didn't even have the courtesy to tell her himself. Did this mean that the two of them were through? Their relationship must truly be over. Violet didn't say anything else. She just quietly went upstairs. Safely alone in her room, Violet lay down on her bed. Logan's gift of the 2 properties had probably been split payment, although she was pretty sure he would ask for this house back since he was kicking her out. Was it because Ava Monroe was going to be moving in? Or was he going to have his future wife live somewhere new? Logan probably had so many properties that even he could not remember them all. Violet shook her head. She did not want to think about this anymore. She did not want her thoughts completely caught up in a man. After returning to Los Angeles, she swore she would not let herself fall into any emotional vortex or trap again. Logan's actions clearly indicated to her that their relationship had ended. Violet needed to move out and move on with her life. She took a deep breath and decided to have her things taken to the Kingston mansion first thing in the morning. Violet had planned to have some work done to the house before moving in. She wanted all traces of Miranda and her family removed before she arrived. It looked like Violet wouldn't have that luxury now. When Violet went to bed that night, she tried to feel excited about moving into her childhood home the next day. But all she could think about was how this was her last night in Logan's house. After tossing and turning for hours, Violet gave up, switched on her bedside lamp, and pulled out her laptop. Out of curiosity, and because she could no longer stop herself, Violet typed Ava Monroe's name into the search engine. When her photo came up, Violet thought the woman was pretty, but there was nothing special about her. She looked like every other daughter of a wealthy family you'd find wandering around the local country club. Pearls, sweater set, elegant updo and all. She was precisely the type of woman Agnes would want Logan to bring home to her. Violet sighed. Agnes must love her. She wondered how long Ava and Logan had known each other. Was this a whirlwind romance or an old family friend where feelings had suddenly changed? It made Violet feel a bit ill to think they could have been in contact while she was with Logan. If they had been, did Ava know Logan had a mistress? Did she know about Elizabeth's baby? Was cheating just accepted behavior among the rich? Ugh! Violet slammed her laptop closed. She wanted to send a message to Logan and tell him what she thought of his behavior. But Violet had previously sent him a few texts and he never replied. Not wanting to have a one-sided argument, Violet put down her phone and pulled the covers over her head. This whole thing just didn't make sense. Despite all the evidence to the contrary, this didn't feel like the end of Violet and Logan's relationship. If he was getting engaged, then why didn't he just say so? Why, instead, did he keep ordering Mike to tell Violet to be patient? It made no sense. Was he trying to make her angry and uncomfortable? Was this Logan's final punishment? Violet did not want him to get away with it. Violet was having trouble believing Logan was really engaged to Ava Monroe. She knew she shouldn't be dwelling on Logan's actions. Violet was starting work at the Kingston group and moving into the Kingston mansion. She needed to focus on her own life and forget about Logan. But Violet just couldn't let go of the nagging sensation that this wasn't the end of their relationship. She knew Logan better than anyone, and something just didn't feel right. When Violet arrived at the Kingston mansion the next day, her suspicions of Logan's intentions only grew stronger. Whereas Violet expected to walk into a musty mess, the Kingston mansion had already been thoroughly cleaned. There was fresh paint and flooring throughout, and all of Miranda's family possessions were gone. In their place was an assortment of beautiful custom furniture, enough to get her started, so Violet wouldn't be sleeping on the floor. Most importantly, it appeared that her family's heirlooms had been carefully preserved and rescued from the Kingstons' clutches. Violet saw paintings, china, and books that had been in her family for generations. Even the old grandfather clock in the hall had been polished and tuned. Violet did not think these were the actions of a man who didn't care. Logan had spent a great deal of time and money preparing the mansion for her. It must have taken an army of people to make the house livable so quickly. He had taken care of every aspect carefully, walking through the rooms and seeing Logan's attention to all the details. Violet found it even harder to believe that he would get engaged to someone else. With every coat of paint and freshly carpeted room, Logan seemed to be telling her he still cared. Was Violet reading into things? Was she fooling herself? Deep down, she hoped not. While Violet settled into the Kingston mansion across town, the Alexander family accepted Joanna's suggestion. Garrett was buying the Smith Group. Joanna and Agnes assured Logan he had nothing to worry about, to trust them. On the surface, Logan seemed conflicted, but he ultimately agreed this was the best way to handle the situation. When Garrett got the news that Logan caved, he promptly sent the paperwork to his mother for his brother to sign. He feared Logan would change his mind if Garrett didn't act immediately. He had been waiting and dreaming about this day for a long time. Logan had given in to the pressure and fallen hard. Garrett was already planning a launch party to celebrate the merger of Laurie Group and the Smith Group. He didn't know how he would keep the smile off his face when he saw Logan's miserable appearance. At this point, Logan officially stepped down as CEO of Smith Group. The only condition Logan had insisted on was that the Smith Group shares he'd gifted Adam and Amy remain untouched. Garrett figured this would make him look good in Violet's eyes, so he agreed. Garrett saw it as offering Violet an olive branch. No matter what happened to the Smith Group, it would be business as usual for the Laurie Group and the Kingston Group. Garrett didn't believe that Logan would marry Ava Monroe, but if they were really together, he supported it. It would only make it easier for Garrett to capture Violet's heart. Even if Logan's marriage plans were real, Garrett knew it wasn't a love match. He knew every time Logan saw Garrett and Violet together, it would infuriate Logan, and he relished any chance to cause his big brother pain. When Violet walked into the Kingston building for her first day of work as the Kingston Group's director, the moment felt a bit surreal. She couldn't believe she was finally here, that this was finally happening. She almost asked Noah to pinch her to ensure she wasn't dreaming. On her first day, Violet met with the board of directors. Most of the directors supported Violet, but some holdouts and allies of Miranda's remained unconvinced. Lionel sat beside Violet at the conference table, but he was having trouble following the conversation around him. He was too distracted by Violet's beauty. From his seat beside her, he could even smell her orchid-like scent. Was it from shampoo or perfume, he wondered? The surge of desire he felt being so close to her was almost unbearable. Lionel wished he could immediately banish Chloe and take the woman next to him as his own. Violet, for her part, did everything in her power not to make direct eye contact with Lionel. When she spoke to him, she called him Vice President Lawson. It honestly made him want her more. Why had he never noticed the fire hiding under Violet's gentle exterior when they'd been together? The possessive desire in Lionel's heart became even more potent. Violet, why don't we grab lunch together today? Say, noon? My treat. I know a great restaurant close by, and it will give us a chance to catch up. Lionel had waited for everyone else to leave the conference room before asking Violet to lunch. Who would have thought that one day we would become colleagues? You are my superior now, so I want to impress you. Then you can take care of me. Lionel gave Violet his most charming smile. Vice President Lawson, all I need is for you to do your job well. In the future, all promotions will be merit-based. As for Lionel's ambiguous words, Violet ignored them and his lunch invitation. She smiled and started to walk out, Vivian following behind her. Vivian was the new executive assistant that Noah had found for Violet. She had vast experience and came highly recommended by Corey. Violet knew she would need all the help she could get as she navigated through the Kingston group. "Vivian, can you give Violet and me a minute? I need to speak to her privately," Lionel told the assistant. "There's no need for privacy, Vice President Lawson. Anything you say to me, Vivian should hear so she can take notes," Violet told Lionel, firmly. "Violet, can't you call me Lionel?" Lionel's eyes were full of sadness. Usually women liked his attention, but Violet seemed completely unaffected by his charm. He gave her a slight pout. Before Violet could think of a reply, Vivian showed why Noah had hired her, smoothly stepping in. "Vice President Lawson, Miss Kingston will be late for her next meeting if she doesn't leave now. I'm also afraid lunch is not feasible today, as Miss Kingston already has a lunch booked with Mr. Smith. You should call for an appointment earlier next time," Vivian told Lionel with a professional smile. Noah again! Lionel internally fumed. Noah was not an employee of the Kingston group, yet it seemed the man planned to spend his days camped out in Violet's office. Hearing this, however, Lionel had no choice but to force a smile and agree to schedule lunch another time. When Lionel returned to his office, he sat behind his desk with a gloomy face, thinking. He barely noticed when Elizabeth waltzed in. She swayed her hips and walked closer to him with a wicked smile. But today, her seductive show did nothing for Lionel. "Lionel, I haven't eaten yet. Won't you treat me to lunch?" Elizabeth asked. She leaned on the desk with her chin propped up and looked at Lionel. She had a curvy figure and desire in her eyes. Elizabeth did not believe that Lionel wouldn't be affected by her. Before Violet left for lunch, she had a moment to check social media quickly. Because it was Violet's first day at Kingston Group, Priya had posted a message on Instagram congratulating her. Below Priya's post, all of Violet's friends were supportive and encouraging. Violet saw Haley, Noah, Jay, Garrett, Drake, Corey, and even Lionel had left comments wishing her luck and success. Only Logan acted as if he didn't know and didn't care. Violet's first full day at the Kingston Group was busy. Noah and her new assistant Vivian had been there to help, but Violet was still feeling overwhelmed. Other than a quick lunch with Noah, Violet worked non-stop all day. Furthermore, all her friends, and even Lionel, had wished Violet good luck on her first day at work. But she'd heard nothing from Logan. Yet again, Violet checked her social media and email accounts, but Logan still hadn't left her any messages. She tried to convince herself that she didn't mind, but she did. Logan's actions lately were just so contradictory. Feeling a little depressed, Violet threw down her phone and continued to sign the stack of documents in front of her. Violet could see that there was a lot of work to be done in the Kingston Group. Many of the company's problems had been piling up for some time, and they were now unceremoniously dumped in Violet's lap. She wondered if the Kingstons had tried to make things intentionally difficult for her. Violet knew that many people doubted her ability to manage the Kingston Group, and frankly, she was one of them. "I don't know how I'm supposed to get through all of this old work and still have time for any new business." Violet shook her head as she continued to sign contract after contract as Noah placed them in front of her. "There will be some growing pains, Violet, but it'll get better, and you've got me to help you." Noah had spent the day at the Kingston Group helping Violet navigate her new role. "You won't always be able to be here to help me, Noah. Your law firm is very busy. I think your other clients will be angry if I monopolize all your time. Even with Vivian's help, I don't know how I will manage all this, though," Violet replied anxiously. "Sounds like someone needs a big glass of wine and some fondue," Haley said as she waltzed into Violet's office. She winked at Noah and went around the desk to give Violet, who had barely looked up, a quick hug. "Are you sure you don't need a new job, Haley? I'm serious. I don't care what job. If you want, it's yours," Violet told her. "I think Garrett might take exception to you trying to steal his employees. especially given how busy Lori Group is right now with the acquisition of Smith Group, Haley replied. Haley still hadn't quite wrapped her mind around the fact that Logan was out of a job and Garrett had purchased the Smith Group. She kept wanting to call Logan to ask him what was going on. Haley had witnessed firsthand how brilliant Logan was at his job. The man was strategic and had stellar instincts, and Haley just couldn't imagine Logan being deceived like this. And then there was Logan's treatment of Violet. Talk about a reversal. Previously, Logan had wanted to monopolize all of Violet's time and attention. Smoke came out of the man's ears if another man came within 3 miles of Violet. But now, Logan ignored Violet, and news had broken that he was engaged to someone else. Oh, but despite all that, Logan had just gifted Violet 2 giant houses. Nothing the man was currently doing made any sense to Haley. When Haley told Noah she wanted to confront Logan about his treatment of Violet, he told her no. Haley had argued that something was clearly wrong. Violet was anxious, so Haley asserted that it was her responsibility to try to help as Violet's best friend. Haley wanted Logan to know how he was making Violet feel. But Noah had remained adamant. He'd told Haley she was going to have to trust him, that Logan didn't need the distraction with so much hanging in the balance. Noah tried to reassure Haley by telling her that he didn't believe Logan and Violet's relationship was over, and that he didn't think Logan wanted to marry someone else. Haley couldn't understand how Noah could remain so calm. He was acting as if nothing had happened. If it wasn't for their relationship being solid and the two of them now living together, Haley might have thought that Noah was happy Violet was single again, so he could pursue her himself. She really couldn't figure out what all these men were thinking. Anyway, Garrett had already purchased the Smith Group. All the paperwork was signed and finalized. Haley had heard there would be a launch party celebrating the merger. She knew the brothers didn't like each other. If Garrett beat Logan, he would definitely throw a party and celebrate, making sure that Logan could attend so he could rub it in his big brother's face. Maybe more of this would make sense to Haley after the party. Haley had made a reservation at a popular fondue restaurant, and after work, everyone went to dinner together to celebrate Violet's first day at Kingston Group. Priya even called Drake, who came over to join them. When they reached the restaurant, it was packed. Downstairs was the lounge area, and upstairs was the restaurant. As they headed upstairs, they passed a group of people coming downstairs who was complaining loudly to a manager. They said there was some lunatic on the second floor, and it was so noisy that people couldn't converse or eat. They wanted the restaurant to comp their meals. As Violet's group reached the top of the stairs, they could hear a woman's voice shouting, "I'm not crazy! I'm not crazy! It has nothing to do with me! It's all Violet's fault!" Violet froze when she heard the voice. What was Chloe doing here? Why was it that Violet couldn't even go out to eat some gooey cheese with friends without her crazy relatives interfering? Noah and Haley pulled Violet to the side at the same time. Priya and Vivian stood in front of them, with Drake bringing up the rear. It was rare for them to go out to dinner together, and the friends did not want Chloe's frenzy to ruin their evening. They could hear Miranda coming down the stairs apologizing. "I'm so sorry. My daughter's mental state is not very stable. She has been stimulated, and coming out to eat today has affected everyone. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. We will leave now." Miranda and Elizabeth were on either side of Chloe, holding one of her arms, and Miranda hurriedly greeted everyone to maintain her last bit of dignity. Elizabeth's face was serene, and she smiled apologetically at those they passed as Elizabeth's assistant trailed behind her. The funny thing was, the women didn't seem to be trying to conceal their identities. Why were they exiting out the front door versus trying to sneak out the back? None of them had even attempted to hide their faces behind scarves or hats. Hadn't the Kingstons had enough bad publicity recently? This fondue restaurant is currently one of the hottest restaurants in Los Angeles. At this time of night, it was guaranteed to be packed with people. The news that Chloe Kingston was acting like a lunatic, again, would spread across every street and alley in Los Angeles within the hour. Yet the Kingstons were exiting out the front door, as if they had nothing to hide. Elizabeth was practically signing autographs. It was as if the Kingstons wanted to be seen, as if they wanted people to recognize them, and as if they wanted the whole world to know Chloe was crazy. Maybe it seemed that way, because they did. Violet and her friends watched as Miranda and Elizabeth escorted Chloe out the front door of the restaurant they were all dining in. Chloe was ranting and raving about Violet, laughing and crying hysterically, acting completely nuts, and the Kingstons didn't appear to care who saw. Miranda and Elizabeth just apologized to everyone they encountered on their way out. The Kingston family cared about their reputation, so why were they suddenly parading crazy Chloe through a Los Angeles hotspot? Violet knew there was only one logical answer. They wanted everyone to see Chloe acting unhinged. Noah had clearly drawn the same conclusion as Violet. Looks like Chloe is going for an insanity defense to escape punishment for the forged will, Noah casually observed. You've got to hand it to the Kingstons. They never give up. If they weren't so evil, I might actually be impressed with their cunning, Haley observed as the friends finally arrived at their table and sat down. One thing is certain, my aunt is not stupid, Violet agreed. She wouldn't have been able to survive this long if she was. Miranda will do anything to escape punishment, even destroy her daughter's reputation by claiming she's crazy. I know I'm new here, but from what I just saw, that Chloe woman does seem mentally unstable. Are you saying Chloe isn't actually crazy? Vivian asked, skeptically. Oh, she's totally crazy, Noah said. Nuts, Priya agreed. Certifiable, added Drake. My cousin is a total lunatic, Violet explained. I just meant my aunt doesn't care who knows that Chloe is crazy if it will help Miranda escape prison. If that's the case, let's make Chloe crazier. Haley smiled wickedly. Priya, tomorrow spread the news of the Kingston Mansion's sale. Let it be known that the true buyer of the house is the Kingston Group's new director, Violet. Haley chuckled as she instructed Priya. Noah frowned. I don't know if that's a good idea, Haley. It's not just Chloe that will lose it over that news. You've got Miranda to contend with too. Why stir up trouble? Noah had a deep understanding of the fierceness and maliciousness of these women. That's right, Miranda, that old witch, definitely can't swallow her anger. She's been plotting against her husband and his unborn child, Priya agreed. She had seen Miranda follow Charles, and Priya knew she wanted to take out her husband's pregnant mistress. Priya didn't want Miranda using these same methods on Violet. Violet's now the director of the Kingston Group. If Miranda dares to cause trouble, she can blame it on Lionel. Why should we be afraid of her? Haley didn't think it was a big deal. Violet was in a position of power now, even without Logan's constant protection. If Miranda tried to touch Violet, she would have to think twice and see if she could bear the consequences. I refuse to be intimidated by my relatives anymore. I came back to Los Angeles to take revenge, and that's what I'm doing. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life hiding overseas, and I won't spend it hiding here, either, Violet proclaimed. I'll drink to that, Haley said, raising her glass. Cheers to new beginnings, Noah added, and they all clinked glasses. As everyone began digging into the fondue pots placed in front of them, Violet looked around the table at her friends and tried not to think of the person that was missing. Violet knew she should be happy. She was enjoying an evening out with dear friends. This was much better than when she was with Logan, who wanted to control her and know Violet's every move. She had more freedom now. However, Violet couldn't help feeling a little lost. She would have thought she would enjoy her newfound independence, but she didn't. Violet had come to understand Logan. While others saw his behavior as controlling, Violet knew this was just how Logan showed he cared. Now that Logan wasn't trying to control her, it felt like Violet no longer mattered to him. Violet had hoped moving back into the Kingston mansion would help alleviate these feelings. She'd thought returning to where she'd once lived with her grandfather and parents would give her a sense of belonging again. And while the house brought back wonderful memories, Violet still felt something was missing. She was really becoming more and more unsatisfied. She wished Adam and Amy could live with her. Then maybe Violet wouldn't feel so restless and sleep better. Every night Violet tossed and turned before falling into a fitful sleep, where she'd return to the same disturbing dream. Violet was in the car with her parents, and it was going very fast, and the situation seemed critical. Even in her dreams, Violet could feel her heart racing. Then Violet's mother would be braiding her hair, before Violet found herself running through the rain and sleeping in a cottage, listening to her parents' worried whispers. The dream would change, and she'd be back in the car. The dark-haired boy would be there. But as soon as he smiled at her, Violet's world would go topsy-turvy, and her nightmare would go black. When she awoke from her dream, Violet would hug herself tightly, always wishing it was Logan's arms comforting her. But he was gone, and this couldn't continue. Logan was haunting her thoughts day and night. She was supposed to be enjoying a night out with friends, and all she could think about was him. Violet felt that it was time for the matter between her and Logan to come to an end. As if sensing his friend's mood, Noah turned to Violet beside him. "I forgot to tell you. Thursday night, Lori Group is throwing a launch party to celebrate their acquisition of Smith Group. Garrett called you earlier, but you were in a meeting. He invited you to attend the banquet with him." "What does that have to do with me? I'm not that close to Garrett." Violet picked up a piece of beef and placed it on her plate. She was starving and had barely eaten all day. Violet realized she'd forgotten to eat since she'd been lost in her thoughts, and Noah must have noticed. Violet didn't want to go to the party with Garrett. After all, in the eyes of many people, Garrett was considered her admirer, even though Violet had never accepted his pursuit. Plus, Violet knew what Logan thought of his brother. She thought Garrett's acquisition of Smith Group just didn't feel right, and Violet couldn't imagine what had made Logan agree to such a thing. Noah popped a piece of fruit in his mouth before asking, "Really? Are you sure? Haley and I are going. And, of course, Logan will be there," he added, a little too casually. Violet coughed and tried to cover her reaction by picking up her wine glass. Maybe going with Garrett to the party wasn't such a bad idea after all, Violet thought. She and Garrett were colleagues, if not exactly friends. Plus, Violet was now the director of the Kingston Group, which worked closely with the Lori Group. As the company's new director, it was probably unwise for Violet to refuse an invitation from an important business partner. She didn't want to seem rude. Turning to Noah, Violet asked, "Did Garrett say what time the party started?" Violet had decided to attend the Lori Group party, but not because of Garrett. Noah had said Logan was going to be there. Whatever this thing between Violet and Logan was, it needed to be resolved, once and for all. If Logan didn't want to come to Violet, Violet would go to Logan. It had been weeks since they'd last seen each other, and she didn't understand what the man was thinking. Logan's actions were so contradictory. "I've decided I should accept Garrett's invitation to the launch party. I'm the director of the Kingston Group, so it seems only fitting that I should attend, since we do business with Lori Group," Violet told Noah confidently. "Yes, that's probably a wise business move," Noah agreed, even though he knew that was not why Violet wanted to attend. Plus, Violet thought to herself, Logan hated Garrett, and if Logan ignored Violet when she arrived on his brother's arm, Violet took another bite of fondue before a horrible thought flashed through her mind. What if Logan was planning to attend the party with his new fiancé? Violet's face paled, and she suddenly felt that the fondue was not very delicious anymore. Seeing Noah watching her, she muttered softly, "There seems to be something wrong with the fondue tonight." "Yeah, I think so too," Noah gently agreed with her. He could guess at the thoughts running through his friend's mind. Violet wasn't the only one that had decided that this thing between Violet and Logan needed to be resolved. No one knew the time had come for Logan and Violet to talk. He hadn't agreed with how Logan had handled his situation with Violet, especially this engagement nonsense. But Noah understood better than most everything happening behind the scenes. It had been hard for Noah to watch Violet hurting, and even harder to keep Haley from confronting Logan. However, neither woman knew that Noah also understood that this had not been easy on Logan, although the man would never admit as much to Noah. When Noah intercepted Garrett's call for Violet, he'd already planned to invite Violet to the launch party, so Garrett just saved Noah the trouble. His investigation into Violet's marriage partner had finally come to a close with an unexpected assist from Mike. Noah was still reeling from the news that Mike had shared with him. The two had scheduled a meeting with Logan tomorrow to share what they had uncovered. Noah couldn't wait to see the look on Logan's face. Miranda and the Kingston sisters' operation in the fondue restaurant had been a success, and everyone in Los Angeles was talking about crazy Chloe. They had driven her straight from the restaurant to the sanitarium, where Miranda was able to get Chloe committed, easily. Lionel knew all about the Kingston women's plan, and even helped persuade Chloe to go along with it, promising he would help to get her released later. However, the Kingstons had forgotten that the Lionel of the past was no longer the Lionel of the present. 4 years ago, Lionel needed to rely on the Kingstons for his livelihood. But now, 4 years later, they were the ones depending on Lionel financially. They quickly realized that the power scales had tipped in Lionel's favor. When news got out that Lionel's fiancé was committed, everyone said they felt terrible for Lionel and Chloe. However, public sympathy didn't last long. Within 24 hours of the news breaking, people started calling and texting Lionel, wanting to set him up with women. Lionel was the second most powerful person in the Kingston group and the owner of Lawson Group. He was rich and powerful, and with his fiancée locked up, the swarms of young women hunting for rich husbands in Los Angeles now saw Lionel as a fair game. Chloe's cousins, Nora and Paige, had been the first women to get in line. This was an unexpected result of the Kingstons' plan, and something Elizabeth and Miranda hadn't counted on. Miranda didn't think she wouldn't have everything under her control, and Elizabeth didn't think there would be so many shameless women in Los Angeles. Most disturbing was that Lionel seemed to relish his sudden popularity with the ladies. Miranda and Elizabeth were surprised by Lionel's actions, but Violet wasn't. She knew better than most how opportunistic Lionel could be. Violet had no doubt that if it served his purposes, the man would let Chloe languish in a padded room. Sure enough, Lionel called for an emergency meeting of the Kingston Group's board of directors. Since Chloe had gone mad, Lionel claimed, even if grandfather's will did not state that Chloe and Elizabeth had the right to inherit, in order to prevent Chloe's madness from affecting the Kingston Group, the board of directors should step in. As the vice president and second largest shareholder, Lionel proposed that all the shares of the Kingston Group that Chloe currently owned, and some assets that she had inherited from her grandfather, should be jointly managed by Elizabeth and Lionel. Elizabeth should immediately assume a position within the Kingston Group and directly report to Lionel. Furthermore, Lionel proposed that given Chloe was mentally unstable, she should forever lose the right to work in the Kingston group. When word reached Chloe about what Lionel had done, she flipped over her dining table, sending cereal, milk, and fruit flying through the air. Miranda ducked as the food flew, thankful that Chloe was only permitted to use a spoon. That jerk! Traitor! Chloe started to curse. This must have been that slut Violet's idea. Lionel would never do this to me. He loves me. Why isn't that woman dead yet? Get me a phone. I want to call Lionel. I need to speak to him immediately. Now, Chloe, calm down. The board of directors has already voted, and it has already been decided. Miranda frowned before sternly adding, and keep your voice down. If we want to deal with Violet, we must not be as careless as the last time. We have to plan better. We cannot fail again, or it will all be over. But Mommy, Violet has already become the director of Kingston Group. How are we going to deal with her now? Chloe was so anxious that she began tugging at her own hair until Miranda stopped her. Why don't I call Lionel and ask him to come see you? Miranda suggested in an effort to calm her daughter. Chloe nodded eagerly, and Miranda knew that she definitely wanted to see Lionel. Lionel had not visited Chloe since she'd been committed, claiming he was too busy at the company. Now, however, when Miranda called, Lionel agreed to come right over. She assumed this meant he still cared about her daughter. Miranda asked the nurses to clean up Chloe's room, but when Lionel arrived, he only frowned and brought another piece of bad news that made Miranda and Chloe both furious. Her hands were trembling. Miranda was so angry. Lionel, you can't be serious. How was Violet able to buy the Kingston mansion? Had Charles actually sold the house to their enemy? Miranda wondered. How could he have been so stupid? Mommy, this must be Violet's trick. Call Daddy and ask him if he knows about this. I think he must not have known. It must be a cruel lie. Elizabeth and I met the new owners. They were scary and wore leather. Charles must have been deceived, Lionel told them. He didn't believe Violet had planned this alone. She didn't have such a scheming mind. Violet hadn't done this. Someone did it for her. Someone with a lot of money and resources at his disposal. Lionel just wondered how Logan had found the time amidst all of Smith Group's problems. Miranda and Chloe were reeling over the news that Violet now owned the Kingston mansion. They couldn't imagine how Violet had made that happen. But Lionel knew. Logan had bought the house for Violet. Chloe was already plotting her revenge. One thing Chloe considered herself an expert in was bullying Violet. She had been doing so since they were kids, after all. When Lionel saw Chloe's face change from sad to scheming, he immediately grew annoyed. Lionel was growing more and more tired of Chloe and her antics. However, he knew she was still valuable, so he had to be careful and continue to coax her. Initially, Lionel had thought that when Violet assumed control of the Kingston Group, Charles would be the one making things difficult for her. When the time came, Lionel could play the hero and swoop in and save a beautiful woman from her scheming uncle. This would lead to the two of them rekindling their old relationship. Unexpectedly, Charles removed himself from the playing field, leaving Lionel with Chloe as the person from whom he could save Violet. Chloe had already previously thrown out revenge ideas, so Lionel decided to encourage Chloe in the hope that it was the catalyst for his and Violet's relationship to heat up. Violet definitely wants to take revenge on me, Lionel sighed with melancholy. Mom, Chloe, I have let you down. What? Lionel! No! Chloe raised her head. I will take revenge for you. Lionel, I think you're right. The problem is Violet is still in love with you. Lionel frowned awkwardly and said, It seems that way. Or why would she still be torturing our family like this? Look what happened with your father's affair getting exposed. It was all her fault. In Chloe's heart, everything was always Violet's fault, so she naturally agreed with Lionel. What's the point dwelling on Charles? His affair has already been exposed. He was the one who asked for it. Serves him right, Miranda said, fiercely. But to be honest, Miranda regretted she hadn't had the chance to deal with Charles in private. If nobody knew about her husband's affair, getting rid of him would have been much more manageable. Now it was impossible, without everyone immediately pointing the finger at Miranda. Lionel, Violet must have held a grudge against us since we first got together. I have an idea. Chloe bit the corner of her pale lips fiercely as she thought. Recent developments had made Chloe abandon all pretense of making herself look presentable. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her greasy hair looked like she hadn't washed it in days. Lionel could hardly bear to look at Chloe. Had he wasted all these years on this woman, when he could have been with the woman he really wanted? Violet was beautiful. She was the woman that every man in Los Angeles dreamed of. Even playboys like Jay and Garrett tried to please her, hoping to get closer to her. Such a woman had once been in Lionel's pocket, but now she simply ignored him. He was the vice president of Kingston Group, and his status had gotten him nowhere with Violet. The distance between him and Violet was more significant than ever. Lionel internally vented all his frustrations on Chloe. The more he looked at her, the more he hated her. Miranda wanted revenge on Violet more than anything, so she now encouraged Lionel. Lionel, you must take back the Kingston Group. Since Violet is seeking revenge, it means that she still loves you. Lionel, for the sake of the Kingston Group, you must pursue her again. I believe that she will listen to your every word. Chloe frowned. She didn't like the sound of her mother's idea. I thought we could find another suitor for Violet, someone that could harass her at work, so Lionel would have the chance to step in and save her. Why does he have to pursue her? Miranda shook her head. No, that's not enough, Chloe. Lionel must actually seduce Violet if we want the woman to do what we want. Lionel was ecstatic at Miranda's idea, but outwardly he put on a face full of concern. Are you sure that's the only way, Miranda? Yes, it's the only way. I believe that Violet will be thrilled to return to your embrace. Lionel, I have confidence in you. As long as you can trick her back, the matters of the Kingston family will be under your control. Then we can do whatever we want, Miranda told him. Chloe was at her wit's end. Miranda felt that this was a good idea. Really? Well, if you think this is the only way, I will do it. For our family, of course, Lionel conceded. Miranda and Lionel's relationship was different from in the past. They had become closer, and Chloe wondered if she'd have no choice but to go along with them. Mommy, is there no other way? How about... The three of them continued to talk for a long time in Chloe's hospital room. Although Miranda had dismissed the nurse as soon as she arrived, he had been listening at the door the whole time and had heard much of what was said. When visiting hours were over and Miranda and Lionel finally left, the nurse called the number the big man had given him. Violet had not expected Mike to have news about Chloe so soon, and he even came to her office to tell her in person. How did you manage to get the information so quickly, Mike? I'm seriously impressed. I think you need a bigger salary, Violet said. No need, Violet. The boss already raised my salary recently. Mike's face was slightly red. He was a bit embarrassed by Violet's compliment. Getting information on Chloe had been easy. He'd found out who Chloe's nurse was, and a few $100s later, The man called him with the scoop. Violet pulled out her checkbook. "No, this is a Kingston group matter. I will pay you for your time. This has nothing to do with your boss, and I'm sure he's swamped right now planning his engagement party with Miss Monroe. You'll have to tell me when they've created their wedding registry so I can send the happy couple a gift." Violet glanced up at Mike. She knew Mike would have to repeat every word she said back to Logan. When Mike realized he'd have to repeat what Violet had said to the boss, he secretly grimaced. Mike remembered all too well what had happened when Corey asked Logan what day he wanted to hold his engagement party. The boss's face had turned as black as the devil's. Logan had narrowed his eyes and stared at Corey without speaking for so long that finally, Corey couldn't take it anymore, and he'd fled to the bathroom. Even a big, tough guy like Mike had wanted to run at Logan's expression. Mike lowered his head and thanked Violet for the check. Logan had already had Mike keeping track of the Kingston group and the Kingston family for months, but Mike knew he couldn't tell Violet that. Only a fool would believe that Logan would draw a clear line with Violet. Mike knew firsthand that Logan's desire to control Violet had not gone away. It had just gone underground. Whereas before Logan had controlled Violet out in the open, now he did so in secret. Keeping an eye on Violet and everyone around her had become Mike's full-time job. There were troublemakers like the Kingstons, but it was the other men who really got Logan going. Mike sometimes wondered what all these men were thinking, chasing after Violet. Garrett, Lionel, Jay, they all had death wishes as far as he was concerned. Mike wished he could give all these men some friendly advice. Covet whoever you want. Just don't covet Violet Kingston. After leaving Violet's office, Mike headed over to see Logan. Today Mike had two bosses to report to. Violet had asked Mike to spy on Chloe in the sanitarium, but Logan had made a duplicate request. So after reporting to Violet, Mike now had to tell Logan what he had discovered. For Logan, the time had come to settle accounts with Chloe. The woman had tried to hurt his children, Violet, and Logan himself. Now Chloe had been committed to the sanatorium by Miranda. This was a tremendous gift as far as Logan was concerned. If he didn't take advantage of this situation, it would be a lost opportunity for revenge. On the surface, Logan seemed cold and calculating. He didn't seem to care about anyone or anything. But Corey knew this impression was false. Logan didn't care about many people, but when he did, he cared deeply. And if you hurt someone Logan cared about, he didn't forget. Logan's revenge didn't always come immediately. He saved it for when it could inflict the most damage. Logan was a firm believer in the old adage that revenge was a dish best served cold. Corey sincerely hoped he was never on the receiving end of Logan's wrath. Although Corey was used to seeing all kinds of deceit in the business world, the Kingston family's level of deception was on a whole new level. Corey had no idea how Violet, who was so gentle and generous, could share blood with those people. Now they'd even discovered that Miranda and Charles had killed Violet's grandfather. There was really no end to their wickedness. It was hard to imagine, and it was even harder to understand. The Kingstons were truly heartless. Miranda and Charles's reckoning was coming. But today it was Chloe's turn to feel Logan's cold fury. As he spoke to Corey and Mike, Logan's tone was icy. We all know Chloe is crazy, but is she certifiably crazy or just Chloe crazy? That's the question we need to answer. It seems like the best way to find out is to provide Chloe with the best medical treatment money can buy. If Chloe's gone insane, then let's get her into therapy, have her doctors prescribe medication to treat her mental illness. Tell our contacts inside the sanatorium to make sure she gets every type of intervention that could help. Leaning leisurely back in his chair, the corners of Logan's mouth curled up slightly, like a sly fox or a satiated wolf, as he continued. If the treatment quickly works because she is faking, then Chloe will be a sane woman, stuck inside an insane asylum, which I can only imagine is its own kind of slow torture. Then, when the doctors finally declare her legally sane and release her, Chloe will no longer be able to invoke the insanity defense. She will be a sane woman who can legally be tried and convicted for all her crimes. Either way, Chloe loses. Logan had no mercy left for this cruel woman. It was time Chloe learned her lesson. Sure enough, within 24 hours, the doctors wanted to release Chloe. Other than being highly excitable and prone to temper tantrums, her doctors couldn't find any evidence of actual mental illness. Chloe was not really crazy. She could go home as long as she had the supervision of a responsible party. But while Miranda wanted to let Chloe leave the hospital, Lionel and Elizabeth refused to allow it. "It's only been a couple of days. Our efforts will be wasted. Everyone will know Chloe faked it. I'm afraid the charges against her will be even more serious if she comes home now," Elizabeth solemnly told Miranda. Lionel and Miranda felt that what Elizabeth said made sense, especially Lionel. He had no desire for Chloe to return home. Not only did he not want to deal with her, Chloe being locked up gave him plenty of opportunities to jump in bed with her sister. Miranda, for her part, was busy trying to get Nora or Paige to jump into Lionel's bed so they could give him a child. Her brother and sister-in-law were not enthusiastic when they saw Miranda and tried to forbid their daughters from seeing their aunt. Before, when Miranda visited her relatives, they would cater to her, even though none of the Rutherfords liked each other. Now, with all the Kingston family scandals and the latest gossip of her father's missing mistress, Miranda had become the Rutherford family's black sheep. It took much more convincing than usual for her family to agree to one of Miranda's schemes. "Don't worry. Leave this matter to me. Just wait and you will definitely be satisfied. Convince Nora or Paige or both so that Lionel can choose. This is not a bad thing. In the future, Lionel will not mistreat your family, and he will provide for you for the rest of your life," Miranda told her sister-in-law. So while Miranda was scheming and Elizabeth and Lionel were hooking up, Chloe was languishing in the sanatorium. Chloe could no longer stand it after a few days. If she didn't get out soon, she thought she would really go crazy. She needed to get out of here. Chloe wanted to rekindle her relationship with Lionel. She wanted to deliver the final blow to Violet personally, and she needed to straighten out her affairs in the Kingston group. What was the matter with Elizabeth? Why was she suddenly in control of Chloe's assets? If anyone should have control of Chloe's finances, it should be Lionel. But when Chloe asked Lionel about this, he said that he didn't want to be misunderstood by outsiders. They might accuse Lionel of wanting to seize the Kingston family's property. Nobody would be suspicious if Chloe's assets were under her sister's control. Well, nobody but Chloe, at least. Chloe felt that she had returned to her place in the family from 4 years ago. In the past, she had been the forgotten daughter. Chloe had always felt like the Kingston family's most unfavored and non-existent person. Now, after everything Chloe had done for her family, she once again was the forgotten one. No one seemed to care about her. Whenever Miranda and Lionel spoke to Chloe, she would cry and make a fuss about wanting to leave. Elizabeth knew her sister's temper. When Lionel would get off the phone with Chloe, Elizabeth would be remarkably gentle and sweet. She made a point of being her sister's complete opposite. She'd flirt and coax him back into a good mood. Lionel indulged in Elizabeth's attention, but he still wanted what he wanted in the end. And what Lionel wanted was Violet. Lionel knew Chloe was desperate to get out, but it had only been a few days, and it would look too suspicious if she left so soon. Unless, Lionel thought, he was to ask Violet if Chloe could come see her and apologize. Lionel thought this could be an opportunity for him to get close to Violet. He knew Violet would never agree, but it never hurt to ask. And asking would give Lionel an excuse to interact with Violet. Inspired by an excuse to see Violet, not help Chloe, Lionel left his office and went to find her. Lionel saw Violet's new watchdog sitting outside her office. Vivian stopped him outside Violet's door. She didn't let Lionel go any further. He could tell Vivian didn't like him. "Mr. Lawson, how can I help you?" Vivian asked coolly. "I came to find Violet. I need to ask her something. Is she in?" Lionel asked, trying to give Vivian his most charming smile. "No, she's not," Vivian replied. "Okay, well, is Violet free for lunch then?" Lionel tried. "I'm sorry, but she called just now and said that when she finished at the studio, she would have lunch with Mr. Fannin and Mr. Gardner," Vivian informed him. Great, Lionel thought gloomily. Jay and Garrett. Just more of his competitors for Violet's affection. Plans ruined. Lionel said nothing more and returned to his office, where he found Elizabeth waiting for him. At least Elizabeth wanted to have lunch with him. Feeling gloomy, Lionel walked back to his office. Violet couldn't meet with him today because she was having lunch with Jay and Garrett. Lionel wondered if he would ever be able to come up with a way to reignite his relationship with Violet. When Lionel walked into his office, Elizabeth was waiting for him. At least she would want to have lunch with him, he thought. Of course, Elizabeth was also there because she wanted something. She asked Lionel to take her to the Lori Group's launch party. Perking up a bit at the thought of witnessing firsthand Logan's humiliation, Lionel agreed to escort her. Violet hadn't gone to the Kingston Group offices today because she was swamped in the studio. They had reached the final stages of her theme song's production, and today she would record it multiple times. Then Jay and the rest of the team would review the music and make adjustments. Once Jay finished that step, Violet would have one final recording session, and then her part in the process would be done. Frankly, Violet was relieved. Balancing her responsibilities to Jay and the Kingston Group was a lot. Garrett was discussing plans for the launch party with his publicity team when he received a call from Tate. Garrett had given Violet's Lori Group assistant strict instructions that Tate should call him whenever Violet was at the studio. Garrett quickly set everything else aside and left to see Violet. It was noon, so when Garrett arrived, he invited Jay and Violet to have lunch with him. After they'd been photographed the last time they had eaten together, Garrett knew Violet would likely refuse to have lunch alone with him again. Inviting Jay was not only a way around that problem, but also a way for Garrett to keep an eye on him. The producer had been showing Violet a little too much interest, in Garrett's opinion. Shortly after the three of them sat down in the restaurant, a friend of Jay's appeared at their table. Violet wasn't sure if the woman was a girlfriend, confidant, or something else. It seemed like Jay had many new female friends these days. After Jay introduced her to Violet, the woman acted as if she had met her idol. She momentarily forgot all about Jay as she fangirled over Violet. The woman wanted Violet to take a picture with her so she could post it on Instagram. Violet suspected that the caption would identify the two of them as new BFFs. Once again, Violet remembered why she had never wanted to be famous. After she took their picture, the woman squeezed into the booth beside Jay uninvited. She started to whine that Jay hadn't returned any of her calls or texts. "Nobody can be that busy, Jay. I would be hurt if I didn't know we had something special together. When are you going to take me out again? We had so much fun the last time. Oh, I've got a great idea." The woman clapped her hands in excitement. "We should totally go on a double date with Garrett and his girlfriend, Anna." "Garrett, I heard how madly in love the Alexander girl is with you. She is considered quite the catch, you know. I hope you two are as happy together as Jay and I." The woman was full of flattery, but Garrett did not appreciate it. The corner of his mouth curled up to reveal a cold smile. "Anna is not my girlfriend, and no matter how happy you and Jay are, no one's happiness can compare to my brother Logan's. After a whirlwind romance, he's already engaged, after all." Garrett looked at the woman with a calm smile, the dimples on his cheeks visible. After a moment, Garrett turned and stared at Violet. Garrett's eyes said everything. Violet saw the heat in them. She lowered her head and pursed her lips, without saying anything. Jay quickly cut his girlfriend off, before she could say anything else. He was unhappy with what Garrett had said. Everyone knew about Violet's relationship with Logan. Garrett was out of line, bringing up Logan's marriage in front of Violet. While Logan could be cold and arrogant, he didn't go out of his way to be cruel. Garrett was different. Garrett had grown up pampered and spoiled by his mother and grandmother. On the surface, he appeared amiable and kind to others, but in private, Garrett had a terrible temper. Jay and the others in their circle knew how bad his temper could get. Garrett would go to great lengths to remove any obstacles, and he was vindictive. Take the matter of purchasing the Smith Group as an example. Jay did not believe what everyone was saying. He didn't think Garrett had swept in at the last minute to help his brother and save the day. Jay knew Garrett had likely been planning his brother's takedown for years. He had a feeling that now that Garrett owned the Smith Group, he would never give it up. Jay didn't believe the two brothers would run the company together until Logan could resume control for 1 second, and he didn't think Logan believed it either. Jay did not understand why Logan agreed to let Garrett buy the Smith Group in the first place. He knew Logan didn't trust his brother. Jay wasn't a businessman, he was an artist. He didn't know what Logan was thinking. Jay just knew Garrett wasn't the benevolent savior he was making himself out to be. "Violet, are you going to come to the launch party with me? After all, our Lori group and the Kingston group are collaborators. Besides, you used to work at Smith Group. The Smith Group has a very special meaning to you." Garrett's voice was deceptively gentle as he asked Violet to join him. Noah had told Violet about Garrett's invitation last night. While at first she had outright objected to the idea, now Violet wanted to attend. Noah had said Logan would be there, and Violet needed to see Logan and settle this business between them once and for all. Violet didn't relish the idea of running into Logan with his new fiancé. By attending with Garrett, she would at least have someone by her side as well. Violet wondered what Garrett had meant when he said Logan had a whirlwind romance with Ava Monroe. Did that mean Logan had only met Ava recently? Or had the two already known each other, and the feelings between them had recently become romantic? No matter what the answer was, Violet felt Logan owed her an explanation. When she confronted Logan about Elizabeth, he denied anything was going on between the two of them, despite Elizabeth claiming she was pregnant with Logan's child. Violet wondered if Logan would tell her the truth about him and Ava. There were so many unanswered questions between Logan and Violet. Violet knew whatever their current status was, Logan would not like Violet being there with Garrett. Despite their current estrangement, Violet felt she needed to be at the launch party as Logan's former secretary, and, she hoped, friend. She knew better than most how hard it would be for Logan to lose the Smith Group to his brother. Violet didn't believe the story that Garrett was helping Logan out. Even though Garrett hadn't done anything to Violet personally, she still didn't trust him. It was hard for Violet to believe that Logan had been deceived and lost the Smith Group. Despite everything, Violet couldn't help the nagging sensation that things weren't over between her and Logan, and she couldn't believe Logan had lost the Smith group either. Logan had asked Mike to tell Violet to be patient, but her impatience to know the whole truth was growing. Violet hoped whatever the truth was would finally be revealed at the launch party.